Okay, hello and welcome to this short video about setting the scope of your thesis. In this video, we're going to cover what is scope in the context of academia, then we're going to cover feasibility, so what actually is doable in the space of time that you have, then thinking about describing your scope, so being really clear about communicating what it is you are able to do and what you're not able to do, and then finally thinking about the difference between exploratory essays and projects and argumentative ones, especially in the context of setting out what you aim to do at the beginning of your dissertation. So, what is scope? Well, in the context of specifically a dissertation or a thesis, the scope of a thesis defines the boundaries of your research. So, what it is you are going to do and what you're not, ensuring focused and achievable goals with the time and resources allotted to the project. So, being really realistic about what it is you're going to do, what it is you're not able to do, and judging that in conjunction with what it is that you have available to you for the project. So, when considering the feasibility of your project, there are a few things that you do have to consider that will depend on whether you are a STEM student or whether you're a humanities student. So, if you're a STEM student, you want to be considering maybe you have some budget constraints, maybe that are to do with travel, maybe to do with paying the people that you're experimenting or interviewing. There might be some funding requirements if you are receiving funding. They might have specific things that they want you to tick off. Obviously, the most important is going to be your time frame. So, how long do you have to complete this project versus your workload? Of course, you're going to think about how long does it take me to write up? How long does it take me to travel to a certain place? Maybe if you are a social sciences or an anthropology student and you want to travel to a place, how long can I stay in that place and try and integrate with the people there? So thinking about your time frame and making sure that everything works with that, creating some kind of timeline. Maybe you want to use a Gantt chart to make sure that everything has a space for it and also some wiggle room as well, understanding that things can be flexible and change as you go along. You want to be thinking about your sample size, so feasibility. If you're a master's student, you will definitely have a smaller sample size than a PhD student, or if you're working as part of a team, then maybe it's slightly larger in that case. Thinking about your methodology as well. So if your methodology has multiple steps, if it has more than maybe like 10 or 20 or 30 different steps, then is that all actually realistic within your time frame? And do you have to complete things like an ethics form, for example? Do you have to consider whether or not you could physically do this because of it because it might be unethical, for example. And then finally, any confounding variables that could bias your research if not accounted for. Thinking about these at the very start of your research can be really supportive to make sure that you don't get any nasty surprises as you go along in your research. For humanities students, it's a similar case with some slight variations. So, equally thinking about what you have access to. So, for your primary sources, if you're going to go through archives, for example, are those actually accessible? Can you physically get to them? Again, maybe you need to travel to them. And also, if you're going to go through, maybe the entire letters of a certain author, then you might have to think, okay, actually, do I have the amount of time to go through 300 letters and read all of them and take, substantial notes? Maybe I'll think, okay, I'll read just the letters from 1912 to 1918 and reducing them down that way. So thinking about each chapter of your thesis as a standalone essay can be a really useful way of thinking about how your ideas will translate into the essay itself. So gauging the size of your thesis can be really difficult if you don't have a sort of mental comparison. But if you think, okay, well, actually, I know that I want my thesis to be an introduction, a conclusion, and then five sort of central body chapters or sections or whatever it might be, then you can think, okay, well, maybe those will be 2,000 words or 2,500 words, and I know exactly what goes into making an essay. So I know I need one overarching idea, and then within that, I need two ideas for, I need a good case study, I need a moment where I do a close reading, a moment where I put in some theory, and then you can develop it that way and see whether you have either too many ideas or too few ideas, and at that point be able to build on your structure. So also understanding, thinking about it on this sort of chapter level, but also within each chapter, each paragraph as well. So each paragraph should have one single point. So it might have many examples, it might have a lot of, 2 or 3 case studies, but actually it should be sort of proving one thing or putting forth one thing. So thinking when you go to your notes and when you try and translate those notes into the chapter itself, thinking how many points do I have? Like, yeah, I might have, 50 different examples, 50 different case studies, but do I have enough points or do I have too many points to fit into this idea, this chapter, whatever it is? So when it comes to your introduction, when it comes to your abstract, or maybe even a proposal, there's many different ways when you have to describe the scope of your essay. So there's a few things to think about. We'll go through them one by one. So the first one is do not be afraid of being overly clear. I know there is this feeling potentially that you're being really obvious, or maybe you even feel patronizing to your readers or your academic supervisor, for example, but always just have in the back of your mind that examiners are kind of time poor individuals that will ultimately have to read your work quite quickly. And so having really clear signposted ideas will always be extremely useful to them in particular. So yes, expand lyrically in the body of your paragraphs, but always signposting really clear at the top and the bottom of those exactly what point you're making. And even more importantly, in your introduction, being really clear what it is you're going to do, what it is, the context, and then what exactly is your contribution. And then once they have that red thread, they are going to be able to find that exactly as it goes through the essay. So when you are describing, for example, what it is you want to do, just be crystal clear and do not be afraid of sounding really obvious when you describe exactly what it is that you can do and what it is that you aren't going to be doing. So this idea that a thesis is not a mystery novel, I think some people like the idea of doing a sort of plot twist right at the end of the essay and shocking their readers. Well, in a thesis, in an academic piece of writing, everything has to be really clear right from the start. So describing exactly what it is you're going to be leading up to can not only produce like just more clear work, but it can also inform the rest of your writing. So if people understand that ultimately we're going to be getting to this one grand point, then it makes it clear that when you're reading the context, what that context is in aid of, basically. So describing exactly where it is you want to get to can, bring the whole essay into focus, the whole thesis into focus. Setting out the aims of every chapter with reference to your contribution. So your contribution being your response to a research gap, the thing that makes your essay important. Setting out the aims in the introduction of every single chapter. Each chapter, will be contributing in a different way, but ultimately will have reference to that one overarching point and making that super, super clear right at the start. And then also being clear about the limitations of your research. So what you can do has been stated, hopefully, when you do a sort of breakdown of what each chapter is doing. And then also, this might be in the conclusion, but in a proposal, it's also something that you should mention, especially if there's something that's, would immediately come to mind in an expert of the field. If, say, for example, in a certain topic, there is one writer who is like, oh, that's like the person to talk about when you think about this subject, and you haven't written about that author, then making sure that the examiner knows that you are aware of this person and you've dismissed them for an intelligent reason, because of the scope of your essay. So a final piece of advice would be also to think about whether or not your thesis is argumentative or exploratory. So what do I mean by that? Well, an argumentative thesis is kind of the standard way that you would write an essay. It is an essay driven by a clear position that is argued using evidence. So generally what you would find in most essays. And an exploratory one is a bit more experimental. It's an essay that gathers information about a certain topic and explains or expands upon that information without that distinction of a clear position that is being argued. Okay, so in terms of setting out your scope, the idea is that if your essay is exploratory, you have to be really careful because you have even more responsibility to be really clear about your purpose and the contribution of your work to your field of study. So, if there is a kind of problem that you're solving in an argumentative essay, your contribution becomes quite clear. But if it's simply gathering information about a certain thing and not producing a certain clear argument from it, but just adding to the wealth of knowledge, you have to be really clear about that at the very start. So setting out your scope becomes really important in an exploratory essay so that your examiner isn't left feeling like, oh, well, this didn't tell me anything, it didn't produce anything from the things it found. So thinking about what actually are your findings, what are the things that you are adding onto the information that you're collecting, and what is the purpose about bringing different ideas together and seeing what they do in collocation, right? What is the fruit of your exploration? So in an exploratory essay, it might be tempting to think, well, I'm just going to, give myself certain themes and think about what I'm writing about. But actually, if you write everything first and then discover something beautiful along your explorations, then making sure that you put that discovery at the very beginning in your introduction, making it absolutely clear the fruit and the purpose and the contribution of your thesis. So that's everything from me. If you have any questions or if you have any feedback, do get in touch via the email academicskills@wolfson.cam.ac.uk, or indeed you can book a one-to-one session with me. That's available on the college website at the link that's available on the screen. If you would like a 1-hour session going through any different academic skills, or indeed you can book the same thing with Laura, the head librarian, or any of our writing consultants as well. So I wish you the best of luck with your dissertation and thank you for watching.